You are listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent Talk.
Happy Tuesday evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Scotty Roberts. You're listening to the Intrepid radio program right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. That's ODYSY1.com if you want to come over and hear just the audio stream and find out all the different outlets online and on terrestrial radio where you can find this program. You can also see all the goodness that is Odyssey Radio by looking at the lineup and seeing what you can listen to all throughout the day. And, of course, you can come over to the YouTube channel and watch my simulcast of this broadcast and join the YouTube chat room. It's a live chat room where all the Intrepids like to hang and make comment on the show and add their input and their insight. You can do the same thing. Come on over, join the chat room, and like the page, and you can watch this broadcast in simulcast in video over there. I want to thank you for being here today. Thanks for putting up with the fact that I took a day off yesterday. I was going to do a show yesterday, and as the course of my day went on, the busyness of the day, the different things that had to be done, seemed to be obstructing every turn to get this show accomplished yesterday. And so I put up the short, I think it's 6 or 7 minute live stream yesterday to announce that I wasn't going to do a show last night, but that I'd be back today. And here we are this morning. Thank you very much for being here. And by this morning, I'm saying I do pre-record my shows every day. And it's only because I record for the video and the audio for the radio on 2 different programs at the same time. And so we record a few hours early and broadcast in the evening. That's why I can show up in the chat room and join you all in talking on the chat room while the show is playing. So there you go. Thanks for being here. Come on over, and if you want a tarot reading, you know I do those. Go over to my website, scottallenroberts.com. Click on the tarot link, and you'll see 2 PayPal buttons. Click the 5-card or the 10-card reading, and go ahead and make a payment to PayPal, and we'll line you up, get you on the schedule. So thanks for doing that as well. And if you're over in the video chat, just look down at the bottom. You'll see the scrolling websites down there, and that's how you can find me pretty easily. And other than that, let's jump into what I wanted to talk about yesterday, which I've now carried over to today. And I've got a ton of information up in front of me because I wanted to hit a topic that in and through all this stuff we talk about when we're talking about the historical Jesus, or are Jesus and the devil or Satan or Lucifer the same character? We've talked about that. We've talked about history. The history, so far we dug pretty deep into Wounded Knee, both historically in the past, in the conquering of the American West, all the way up to Wounded Knee standoff in the 1970s. And we looked at what those were all about. We've gone into history of Christianity, history of paganism, history of Gnosticism, brief history of the Cathars. We asked the question, why do you believe what you say you believe when it comes to spirituality? And we dug into that, into the comparisons between Gnostic mysticism and early Christianity and how it's changed over the years into the literalist Orthodox Christianity that exists now. We've looked into all different kinds of things about experience, about relationships, about wisdom, about virtue, all of these things, and what do they mean to us? And so I wanted to hit today because I think about this a lot myself lately. When I say to you, and I'm also saying to myself at the same time, we need to be awake, we need to be aware, we need to be in the now. What does that take to do that? And we've talked about that, but it's all a mental, really, activity that we engage in the physical worlds in which we live in. It's a spiritual issue. It's a mental issue. It's a conscientious issue. It's a consciousness issue. And in doing all of this, does any of that give us any wisdom? If we look at the world around us, and we realize that we are part of a physical world, but we kind of coast through that world. We're awake, but are we aware that we're awake? We talked about that and how to lift yourself up out of that and to be aware of your awakeness, to live in the now and live in the moment. Is this the stuff that gains wisdom? Well, I think that's a rudimentary, that's a bit of a foundational issue to gaining wisdom, is certainly knowing where you are, being awake of where you are, being aware of what you are and where you are, and being in the now, living in the moment. Yesterday on Rocky's show, I talked about the old fish philosophy, and that was the philosophy that they used for business management, finding toxicity within companies and things like that. It was the fish philosophy that started in the Seattle's Pike Place market. If you go, by the way, if you go to the grocery store and you see Starbucks coffee, the Pike Place is what that's talking about. That's referring to the Pike Place fish market. And it was how they tried to find great ways to help their employees enjoy being there. Because if you had a happy employee, you got an employee that's going to do well and is going to want to be loyal to you if you're loyal to them. So they founded this philosophy. And the 4 steps, the 4 points of the fish philosophy are: you get up in the morning and you choose your attitude. Choose your attitude for the day. And you carry that with you throughout the day. Do you know attitudes, moods, all of those things? Yes, there are some clinical situations where mood swings are tough to deal with. But did you know you can choose your mood? You can choose your attitude, your mood and your tude. We're able to choose those things. So you choose what your attitude's going to be. The second one is you play. You play when you're at work as much as you can. Now, I had the unenviable or the enviable position of being a creative when I worked in advertising and publishing. And my office usually was full of toys all the time. I had all my action figures and my toys, my little basketball thing. The copywriter and I would generally have rubber dart wars, Nerf guns now. And that's the kind of stuff we did. When you allow people to play to a certain extent, you allow them to get out their creative juices and enjoy being where they are. And especially for creatives, you always gave them toys. That was the way to make them work the best. So you choose your attitude, you play. The third one is make somebody's day. Now, do you do that when you go to work and when you go out in the world? Do you make someone's day? Do you? And that's as easy as smiling at somebody. And now, that's a little harder to do nowadays sometimes because somebody's going to slap you with a sexual harassment suit. So you smile the right way, choose your attitude, play, make somebody's day. How do you make somebody's day? It's in the small things. It can be in the big things, but it's usually the small things. I might go to work and go, "Hey, Leslie, I found this great pencil and it made me think of you." See, it says on here, choose your adventure. Whatever. I'm giving this to you. I thought you'd like that pencil. See ya. I got to go to work. And you do something like that, you can make somebody's day. And that's just a weird example off the top of my head. But telling somebody they look nice today, or hey, it's good to see you today. Nice to work with you. Things like that. Make somebody's day. It could be your wife. It could be your husband. It could be your children. Make their day. If you got to drive your kids to school in the morning, is it everybody's going? Make your kids' day. Make them laugh on the way to school. When you're getting them out the door to the bus, make sure they know, even though it's harried most mornings, getting kids out the door, you love them and make their day. So that's another. And the fourth one is being there. Being there. Being present. And I would say being awake, being aware, being in the now, in the moment, being there. And so you be there for people. Now, does that mean we don't slip up sometimes? And I don't always hear. Rocky and Rainey and I were talking about this after the show yesterday, the live morning show with Rocky. we're all online here on the cameras talking to each other about, Rainey's like, well, I told him that and he didn't hear me. And Rocky said, I thought you said you were supposed to be there. And I said, sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I'm somewhere else. I'm reading, I'm writing, I'm doing something. So sometimes I tune out. I have this really bad habit sometimes of having my mind be in a million places, and my wife or a friend or somebody could be looking right at me, talking right to me, and I'm totally in la la land and I miss it. I'm not being there. So the 4 things, fish. It's choose your attitude, play, make somebody's day, and be there. Being there, be in the now. And with all of this stuff, is this the stuff that gains wisdom, or is this the stuff that builds wisdom? First, you got to ask, what's wisdom? What is wisdom? When we say, I used to ask when I was a lot younger, I used to say, why do I have to be old to get wisdom? Well, sometimes it's because wisdom comes with experience. Knowledge and experience combined. Wisdom, it's one of those qualities that's difficult to define because it encompasses so much stuff in our lives. But it's something which people generally recognize when they encounter it. When you encounter a wise person, you usually step back and go, wow, that guy's he's pretty wise. You might not use the word wise, but you get it. And it's encountered most obviously in the realm of the way we make decisions. Our decision-making process. Wisdom comes when you're making a decision. And psychologists tend to agree that wisdom itself involves this integration of knowledge, of experience, deep understanding that incorporates tolerance for the uncertainties of life as well as its ups and downs. And so there's this awareness of how things play out over time. And it confers a sense of balance. And when you're awake and aware and in the now, you realize that all moments in time are strung together. So you're always in the now. So wise people generally share an optimism that life's problems can be solved. And you experience a certain amount of calm in facing difficult decisions. Intelligence, if only anyone could figure out exactly what it is, might be necessary for wisdom, but it definitely isn't sufficient. An ability to see the big picture, a sense of proportion, and considerable introspection also contribute to its development. I've known people that I wouldn't rank really high on the intelligent quotient scale, but they're very smart people and very wise people. Wisdom, it can be required or acquired through experience, but by itself, experience doesn't automatically confer wisdom on anybody. You can have lots of experience and still be dumb as a rock and not make good decisions. I know people who are in and out of trouble with the law, that are in and out of making bad choices. They're smart people, but they make stupid decisions, dumb mistakes. They don't choose well. Researchers are constantly probing the social, the emotional, the cognitive processes that transmute experience into wisdom. And, sorry, I'm just looking at some things here. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I'm getting interruptions, and they're distracting my attention over here. This is the problem with doing my radio show while I work at home, is that everybody calls me during my radio show, even though, and they don't know I'm doing it. So now numerous theories have emerged. Developmental psychologist Paul Baltes conceived of wisdom as experience derived from 5 key components: rich procedural knowledge, rich factual knowledge, an understanding of the different contexts, an awareness of the relativism of values and priorities, and the ability to recognize and manage uncertainty. These are the 5 things that give us, I'm going to give those to you one more time. If you're not writing them down, think about these, stick with them. You need to have the 5 key components to gaining wisdom, rich procedural knowledge, rich factual knowledge, an understanding of different life contexts, an awareness of the relativism of values and priorities, how relative they are, and the ability to recognize and manage uncertainty. So there's a sociologist, Monica Ardelt. She believes that individuals develop wisdom as personality characteristics encompassing reflection, compassion, and the pursuit of truth. Psychologist Robert Sternberg understands wisdom as being balance between oneself and others, so that actions are directed at a common good. So how do you gain this stuff? How do you get there? You notice, though, a common thread: knowledge, factual knowledge, know your facts, and application of factual knowledge, balancing those things out, looking for truth in the matter. So wisdom largely emerges from reflection on past experience. Wise people incorporate past observations and opinions into a more nuanced style of thinking, considering multiple perspectives rather than black and white options. Being open to new ways of thinking, essentially challenging the status quo, can be a hallmark of wisdom and help cultivate wisdom and the growth of wisdom. Balance is also a key component of wisdom. Wise people generally act on behalf of the common good, but also ensure that their own needs are met, striving for harmony among competing demands and goals. Wise people seek to understand the motives of other people rather than merely judge their behavior. This is something I've noticed a lot in the political arena. Not the politics in D.C., but the politics that get discussed, say, in social media. The people I think that are the wisest people out there are not the ones who make knee-jerk reactions to things. They're the ones that strive for harmony. They are the people who understand the motives of others because they're awake and they're aware. And so they don't just judge people. They don't have knee-jerk reactions. They think things through. They look at different perspectives. Wisdom can provide this fulfilling sense of purpose, especially when you look at all these different things that are combined in what it means to be wise. But there's more to wisdom than just knowledge and experience. What does it mean to be wise? That's my 10-year-old boy once asked me that. What's it mean to be wise? I got to tell you, a 10-year-old and a 90-year-old are going to have different perspectives on the world and different perspectives of what it means to be wise. And their answers can be similar if they both say being wise means to know a lot of stuff. Well, that's truth. A 10-year-old could latch onto that pretty quickly, to know stuff. A 90-year-old might answer the question the same way. You got to know stuff to be wise. And so for many of us, an image of a wise person is like the white-haired guru type sitting on the top of the mountain, dispensing sage advice with a serene smile and an unhurried gait. But there's more to wisdom than theoretical knowledge and decades of life experience. And there's more than one way of being wise. Winston Churchill. You all remember who he is? If you're a little older, you know who he was. If you're a little younger, and we were asking this on the street, who was Winston Churchill? People might not have any idea. Prime Minister of England during World War II, primarily, and a politician and a writer. Winston Churchill was known for his practical wisdom. Mother Teresa, they said, had benevolent wisdom. Even though I got some problems with Mother Teresa when I look back on it. And there are some issues with Mother Teresa. And Socrates was famed for being philosophically wise. So, where do our beliefs on wisdom originate? And what insights can good psychology offer into what it means to be wise? We've talked about the spiritual side of being wise, that inner side of being wise. But what does psychology tell us? For centuries, civilizations have passed down their ideas of wisdom through stories of morality and virtuous lifestyles. And these stories can come from all over the world. The Sumerians, the ancient Egyptians, ancient Hindu scriptures of Vedas, the Taoist and the Confucian writings from China, the philosophies from ancient Greece. According to these traditions, wisdom stands on many pillars. Benevolence and listening to others is Confucianism. Self-reflection is Taoism. Letting life unfold naturally is Lao Tzu. Questioning is Socrates. And intellectual humility. Recognizing the constraints of one's own thought processes as they're gaining wisdom, as they're experiencing things. So in psychological research, wisdom is viewed as this multifaceted concept with cognitive knowledge and experience, reflective, the ability to examine issues and oneself, reflective, looking inward, and pro-social, which is benevolence and compassion components. And so when it comes to using wise thinking to make better decisions, a lot of these psychological studies point to the importance of perspective. So look at your perspective on things. In particular, viewing situations from a third party or kind of a fly-on-the-wall perspective rather than an egocentric point of view. How's it affecting me? And this is because examining events from a first-person point of view, what's it all mean to me and why am I not in the midst of all of this? That vantage point can limit our attention to the focal features of situations, making us more closed-minded, more defensive, more focused on self. On the other hand, self-distancing through a third-party perspective helps us relate events to a broader context. I try to do this when I talk about spirituality. I try to do it when I talk about politics. Very opinionated on politics. But when I'm in discussion or dialogue or debate with somebody, I try to see the point of view from hanging out over as a fly on the wall, rather than just expressing what I need to say and making myself all important. This is the problem with social media right now, about politics especially. Everybody thinks they have something great to say, and nobody's going to listen to you. You're not going to change my mind no matter what. And that's the way people approach this stuff. That's not getting wisdom. That's not reflecting wisdom or putting out wisdom. That's putting out self. So perhaps this is why we use our wisdom least when we need it the most, because we're focused on self. And so again, awake, aware, in the now, seeing things from a broader perspective than just self. There's this variable, context-dependent wisdom that exists. And it's among the most fascinating recent insights about wisdom. And here's the 5 questions, which we're going to ask when we come back. You know why? Because we're already at the end of this first segment. I got 5 things about wisdom that I want us to look at. So hang tight, sit through the break, and I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
There's an old tale wrought with mystery of Tom the poet and his muse, and a magic lake which gave a light to the words the poet used. Now the muse, she was his happiness, and he rhymed about her grace, and told the stories of treasures deep beneath the blackened waves. Till in the stillness of wonder, and still in its misty crown, the muse, she went down to the lake and and in the waves she drowned. And now to see your love set free, you will need the witch's cabin key. Find the lady of the light, gone mad with the night. That's how you reshape destiny. The poet came down to the lake to call out to his dear. When there was no answer, he was overcome with fear. He searched in vain for his treasure lost, and too soon the night would fall, and only his own echo would wail back as his call. And when he swore to bring back his love by stories he'd create, nightmares shifted in their sleep in the darkness of the lake. And now to see your love set free, you will need the witch's cabin key. Find the lady of the light, still raving in the night. That's how you reshape destiny. In the dead of night she came to him with darkness in her eyes. We're in a morning gown, sweet words as her disguise. He took her in without a word, for he saw his grave mistake, and vowed them both to silence deep beneath the lake. Now if it's real or just a dream, one mystery remains, for it is said on moonless nights they may still haunt this place. That's how you reshape destiny. And now to see your love set free, you will need the witch's cabin key. Find the lady of the light, still raving in the night. That's how you reshape destiny.
Hey folks, welcome back. Thanks for sitting through the break. This is Scotty Roberts. You're listening to my show, the Intrepid Radio Program, right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. And you can go over to odysy1.com to find out all the places this show broadcasts, either on, so if you're in your car and you want to listen, it'll tell you where you can do that. If you have XM radio, it'll tell you where you can do that. We're on all these different streams out there, and as well as terrestrial stations. So you can go over to odysy1.com and go see where to listen to the show. If you'd like to join the simulcast and watch the video and join the chat room with the Intrepids talking live about this show, go on over to my YouTube channel, Mr. Scotty Roberts. And I'm not even sure if I said that the first segment. So that's my YouTube channel. If you're new to the show, Mr. Scotty Roberts. And by the way, if you come back and listen to the archives later, you can see the chat room, but you won't be able to chat because the chat will be locked down at that point. But during the show, you can chat live with everybody over there. Now, this is usually where I like to drop a shameless self-plug. I am an artist, I'm an illustrator, I'm a designer. That is one of the many things I do to earn money, to keep a roof over my head and feed my children. Keep them from starving, keep us all off the streets. So if you are in need of design work, that's by way of logo design, corporate identity pieces, brochure work, things like that, Internet work. That's what I do. I'm an illustrator. If you've written a book and you need a book illustrator, you need a book cover designed. That's what I do for a living. Been doing it for 40 years and 20 years on my own. Yes, 40 years. I started in 1977 as an artist for a little book publisher. I was in high school. So actually 43 years now, I've been doing what I do now. I did it all through college, all through seminary, much lesser degrees back then. Worked for advertising agencies and publishing companies all through the bulk of my career, and set out on my own really about 20 years ago is when I started 19 years ago working for myself as a freelancer. So come on over, check scottallenroberts.com, or you can, if you're watching the video, it's scrolling down below. Come over, check my website. You need anything? Come on over, and we'll take care of you. And also, I just want to put in a quick plug for my friend John Penman. Penman hats. You see them all hanging over here. I wear them from time to time on the show. Best damn hat maker in the world. If you want to get a good fedora, go over, check him out. PenmanHats.com. PenMan.com. If you're on Facebook, you can find him over there as well. So, we're talking about wisdom in the first segment. And so we left off coming to these 5 things, the 5 questions on wisdom. And these are some really fascinating insights about wisdom. So let's look at this. And these were compiled. I was just looking for his name here. Igor Grossman. He's a principal investigator at the University of Waterloo's Wisdom and Culture Lab. And so these are his findings, and these are the questions he asked. Think about these when considering wisdom. 1. How is wisdom acquired? There's the big question. You ever think about that? You ever think about being wise? You ever think about developing wisdom so you make the proper decisions, so that you can be a wisdom for other people as well? Or are you stuck in the day-to-day? I think when you're stuck in the day-to-day and you're just living life, no matter if it's good or bad, and you're coasting along in life, we don't always think about these things. So you have to be awake. You have to be aware. You have to live in the now. So ask yourself, how do I acquire wisdom? And if you consider wisdom to be a skill, then typically there's 2 paths. 1 is that it's through relevant experiences. For example, exposures to stressors in your life or conflicts in your life. Those things actually build wisdom, folks. The other path is through education, virtues, critical thinking. Both of those things can be taught to some extent. And then you need to enact those things, activate them, make them work for you. That's how you generally acquire skills. And for wisdom, it wouldn't be any different. You can gain head knowledge, but until you actually activate it and put it into action for yourself, it doesn't mean much. So that's Grossman's first look at how to acquire wisdom. Then, what characteristics do you most often associate with being wise, to having wisdom? And what it's been found is that there's certain cognitive strategies that are associated with wisdom. Conscious cognitive things that you can notice. One of them is open-mindedness. Another is a form of intellectual and epistemic humility, which means you recognize the limits of your knowledge. Then it's like saying, sorry for small ears, cover the small ears, Susie Q, and anybody else. Like I've always said, the more shit I know, the more I know I don't know shit. That's cognitive, that's epistemic humility, in a sense. You recognize the limits of your knowledge. And then there's consideration of diverse points of view and the integrative ability to take different perspectives into account. Do you do that? Do you have just one way and one way only, or are you open to different perspectives? And that's in general. speaking. So these are the key cognitive features of wisdom. Apply that for a moment to marriage and relationships. When husbands and wives argue, I say, it's usually, you can find its source in the fact that there's such a thing as male English and female English, and they don't always jive. So when you're having these conflicts, do you want to win the argument, or do you want to be open to the perspectives of others? Sometimes that takes a little humility. When Rainey says to me, "You're not being here. You're not here. You didn't hear me." Sometimes I argue the point. Well, I didn't know you were talking to me, or whatever it might be. The point is to say, yeah, you're right. I didn't catch it. So what can I do? So those are ways that you can, the things that we often associate with wisdom. Having this awareness, being aware of other perspectives, not being self-focused. So how can we use wise thinking to make better decisions? Isn't that really one of the reasons we like to look to being wise, or gaining a little wisdom so we can make good decisions? Research is really at the outset, but we have some evidence that features like open-mindedness, perspective taking, intellectual humility. These are things that afford a bigger picture. Looking at the bigger picture, not just what I think. They help you see the contextual features, which can, in turn, help you to identify a fit between the demands of the specific situation you're in and the knowledge you might have about how to handle different situations. In other words, wisdom-related strategies that you incorporate can afford you a greater sensitivity for the context of what's being said. They may also orient you toward a greater balance between your personal interests and the interests of others. And thus this promotes a cooperation under most circumstances. You get a cooperation. So in what way does culture, what's going on around us, influence our wisdom? And there's 3 different ways you can think about this. One is the meaning of what is considered virtuous. What's it mean to be virtuous? That can be very dramatically different across different cultures. So there's different educational paths. In North America, there's this emphasis on achievement. It's often taught to elementary school children. In Japan, where the emphasis is more on perspective taking, this isn't so much the case, at least not in the same way. And thirdly, there are these different types of experiences people have in different cultures. Different cultures have different experiences that set the general path for understanding what it is to be wise. Not only these experiences may be different, but the strategies for handling these experiences may be very different from culture to culture. And when I talk culture, not just talking about overseas, your neighborhood could have its own culture. Your church, your social gatherings, your scouting efforts, Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, schools, all have different cultures about them. Although they're a lot more similar to each other in North America. So, as an example, consider the ways people handle adversity and social conflicts. In Japan, in Hong Kong, where there's all the protesting going on right now against China, people don't really discuss conflicts directly at work. It's not part of their culture to have that kind of openness. Instead, there's often a supervisor, a third party in charge of conflict resolution, which isn't necessarily the case in the U.S. Now, if you work for some place where, say you're in a union, you have a union organizer or a union liaison, you can go to them, but most times people voice their opinions pretty openly in the West here. So why is wisdom considered this universally cherished human virtue? This is just a speculation on my part, but if you take the evolutionary perspective, you see that the survival of the human species requires certain cognitive abilities. It includes planning, perspective, taking some forms of coordination of effort. And these are all within the members of your own group, amongst the members of your own group. So certain features of wisdom are consideration, integration, diverse viewpoints, open-mindedness. In some ways, these are all essential for survival. Imagine yourself, just for a moment, get fanciful with me, imagine yourself in a post-apocalyptic world. How would you survive with the group of people you have? Would you sink to the background and follow the leader? Would you be the leader? Would you want input? All of these things, survival, and this is where I'm talking evolutionary, survival depends on how you do these things, how you're considering, how you're integrating, how you're organizing. Open-mindedness, all of these things are important for survival. So in that sense, those who develop these skills in like the early hunter-gatherer societies were probably more successful and probably lived a hell of a lot longer because they were able to grasp these things. They didn't have the psychological tools we have, but they understood it, and they did it, and that's why they survived. So because under many circumstances, when you're dealing with adversities, uncertainties, these are the skills that help you see the bigger picture and to coordinate with others effectively. If you're out there wondering, okay, we got to go hunt for deer meat, but there's dinosaurs that are going to eat us along the way, we got to get organized about this. Never mind the fact that dinosaurs probably didn't exist alongside humans. So human probability had a role in the successful evolution of mankind. So you can apply those terms to all of this. And so again, you see most of the answers here in gaining wisdom involves cognitive awareness. It involves integration of different ideas. It involves open-mindedness. It involves seeking truth and fact. And so all of these things are part of what it takes to being somebody who is wise. And I've got several other things that play into this here. And some of them, there's some really lengthy things I could get into, and I think I've got a little bit of time. I think I got about 12 or 13 minutes left in this segment. So I might try to hit some of these, but I want you to consider something. Finding wisdom, this all has to do with how we find a greater meaning to who we are. What is the purpose of our existence? To float along day to day, win the gold watch at the end of 30 to 40 years of service to a company, if anybody stays in a company that long anymore. You got to be old already to have done that. And then you die. And there's all the things that happen along the way. So how do we find meaning to that and place meaning in that? Well, first of all, like I've been contending for weeks and months, is you have to be awake, you have to be aware, you have to be in the now. But there's kind of this paradoxical secret that's out there to being able to find meaning to your life. Do you know what that is? I'm going to read through a little example here for you. In 1942, the great psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, his wife and parents were deported to Nazi Theresienstadt, I think is the way you pronounce it. Theresienstadt. It was a ghetto. Just like think of the Warsaw Ghetto in Poland. So they were all deported to the ghetto. His father died of pneumonia half a year later from the ghetto's deplorable conditions. The next year, Frankl and his wife were transported to the infamous Auschwitz death camp, which, by the way, I must state here, is nothing like the detention centers at our southern borders on Mexico. Just got to throw that in there for free. So they were transported to Auschwitz death camp, where more than 1 million people would eventually be murdered. Frankl was then transferred to 2 additional camps, separating him from his mother and his wife, both of whom would eventually die during their separation. Could you imagine the heartache of that? I could not imagine my family being sent to one of these camps, and they separate my wife from me, and they separate my children from me. And many times people never even saw them again. But during this ordeal, Frankl came to believe that the only way he could survive and maintain his sanity was to hold tightly to a sense of meaning and purpose. He was fond of quoting the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. And you've all heard Nietzsche, who wrote, "He who has a why to live for, can bear almost any how." He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. And for Frankl, personally, meaning flowed from acting as a psychiatrist and a physician to his fellow prisoners, as well as from reflecting on his love for his wife, Tilly, as the following passage from his celebrated book, Man's Search for Meaning, beautifully illustrates. Listen to this. This is what Frankl wrote. And this is about he and his wife. This is pretty emotional stuff, so hang on to your butts. We stumbled on in the darkness. The accompanying guards kept shouting at us and driving us with the butts of their rifles. Hiding his mouth behind his upturned collar, the man marching next to me whispered suddenly, "If our wives could see us now, I do hope they are better off in their camps and don't know what's happening to us." That brought thoughts of my own wife to mind. My mind clung to my wife's image, imagining it with an uncanny acuteness. I heard her answering me, saw her smile, her frank and encouraging look. I understood how a man who has nothing left in this world still may know bliss, be it only for a brief moment, in the contemplation of those who are his beloved. This is what Frankl wrote, and these are the things that kept him going. So after being liberated from the camps, Frankl spent his life advocating for the importance of meaning as a salve against suffering and the secret to happiness. Meaning brought him through the Holocaust and formed the basis for his entire approach to life. So it might seem surprising that he would provide this following admonition to all of us. He says, one should not search for an abstract meaning of life. Don't look for the abstract meaning. Why would Frankl warn us not to search for something he so passionately seemed to argue was so important? He provided a clue in the preface of the same book where he writes, "Don't aim at success. The more you aim at it and make it a target, the more you're going to miss it. For success, like happiness, cannot be pursued. It must ensue." Think about that. Let that sink in for a second. Success, like happiness, can't be pursued. It must ensue. In other words, Frankl believes that meaning can't be persuaded as a goal in itself. It must ensue as a side effect of pursuing life, pursuing your other goals. If what you really want is to find meaning, he said, you have to let it happen by not caring about it. Instead, he suggested, embrace activities that connect you with something greater. Look at your own life for a minute. I'm not admonishing anyone. I'm not thinking of anybody in particular other than myself at this moment. Look at yourself and say, do you pursue things that are greater than yourself? This is the beginning of wisdom. This is the beginning of happiness. Now, this might involve connecting yourself with the pursuit of knowledge. How many of you, of us, I don't want to make this a you thing, but I'm speaking to everybody else. How many of us pursue knowledge? Is your pursuit of knowledge something that means something to you? I remember, I got to make a Star Trek reference because it comes to mind. Captain Picard once said, he said, we are more interested now, less interested in the material things than we are in the pursuit of knowledge and expanding our knowledge. Now, Star Trek, we've seen that theory fall apart a bit, but that was his theory. Pursuing something greater, pursuing knowledge by working toward a college degree, committing yourself to the care of other people through your volunteer work, dedicating yourself to expressing love through raising a family, or any other number of endeavors. How do you find yourself being in pursuit of knowledge and connecting with the things that are greater than yourself? Empirical research supports a hunch for this. While having meaning present in one's life is associated with seeking this greater happiness, searching for meaning may be associated with less happiness. You get that? While having meaning present in your life, being awake, being aware, being in the now, being there. These are the things that are associated with greater happiness and wisdom. While searching for the meaning of life can keep leading you down the path, and it's associated with being much less happy. Now, Michael Steger, Shigeru Oshii, and Todd Kashdan conducted an online survey. These psychologists of more than 8,000 people across the globe. And to assess meaning, they used a psychological test known as the Meaning of Life Questionnaire, which gives two distinct scores. The first score indicated the degree to which people are actively searching for meaning, whereas the second score indicates the extent to which they've already found it. And the results are exactly what Frankl would have predicted. Greater search scores were associated with lower life satisfaction and happiness. Greater search scores, the higher the score for searching, was associated with lower life satisfaction. So the paradoxical secret here, folks, the paradoxical secret to finding meaning, finding happiness, gaining wisdom, may be to not look for it at all. There's the paradox. The most satisfying forms of meaning may blossom not when we pursue them and seek them out and struggle to find them directly, but when we instead seek, it sounds a little la-la to some people, but when you seek beauty, when you seek love, when you seek justice, or as Frankl wrote, a cause greater than oneself. That's the secret to a meaningful life. That's the secret to happiness. That's the secret to wisdom. And the secret to all those things just may be to remind ourselves every day to just simply do the right thing. Love. Love fully. Pursue fascinating experiences. Undertake important tasks. Not because we're trying to increase our sense of meaning in life, but because these pursuits are in and of themselves good things for us to have. So, ask yourself now. Ask yourself, are you happy? Do you have meaning in your life? Have you gained wisdom along the way? Look at the things, Rocky and I spoke about this a bit yesterday. What are the things that make you happy? What is happiness? Are you happy? Then look at these things. What are you doing to let it ensue as opposed to pursuing it? Because you pursue it, you make that the goal, you're always seeking the next fix, the next happy, the next thing. You aren't going to find it. It happens in the small things. It happens in just living life, seeking the right things, seeking meaning. And one of those things are those 4 things I mentioned at the beginning from Fish. Choose your attitude. Play. Make somebody's day and be there. Folks, that's all I got for tonight. We're at the end of our time together. So I'm going to take a 23-hour break. We're going to be back tomorrow. And I hope to see you here. And in the meantime, be awake. Be aware. And be in the now. Good night.